She ran into the first car she saw, not knowing it belonged to the Mafia boss. My name is Juniper Hale, but nobody calls me that. It's June. I am 26 years old, and my life is a two-beat rhythm, day and night, sweat and ammonia. By day, I'm a ghost on two wheels. I ride for Rainport legal couriers, pushing sealed envelopes against the clock, dodging taxis and buses from the gleaming Spire District to the rusty guts of the dock line. My thighs burn, my lungs taste the exhaust, and the pay just barely covers the rent. By night, I trade the bike for a mop. From 11 p.m. until 4 a.m., I clean the Rainport aquarium. It's just me. The whale sharks moving like shadows behind 30-inch thick glass and the hum of the industrial filters. I scrub the floors of the shark tunnel, wipe the fingerprints off the jellyfish tanks, and listen to the sea lions bark in their sleep. The smell of brine and bleach sinks into my skin. I do it all for Mabel, my grandmother. She's in our studio apartment back in the dock line, the one with the permanent damp spot on the ceiling that looks like a map of a country we'll never visit. Her heart is failing, a slow, tired rhythm that echoes the drip of the leaky faucet. Her medication costs more than my day rate, so I ride harder, and I scrub faster. This Tuesday started like any other with rain. Not a drizzle, but a cold, angry Rainport deluge that turned the streets into black mirrors. I was finishing my last drop, a set of architectural plans, my rain slicker doing absolutely nothing. I was cold, tired, and thinking only of getting back to Mabel with the clam chowder I'd promised her. That was when they found me. They stepped out of an alley on Kingfish Avenue, 3 of them, blocking the sidewalk. They wore cheap suits that were already dark with rain, but they had official-looking laminated IDs on lanyards. Urban Integrity Council, a name so bland it had to be fake. Juniper Hale, the lead one, said. He had a face like spoiled concrete. He didn't check a list. He knew exactly who I was. My hands tightened on my handlebars. I'm busy. You've been busy, he said, smiling a smile that didn't involve his eyes. Busy refusing work. We offered you a simple delivery last week, a special package. You said no. My stomach went cold. The special package had been a heavy, brick-shaped box I was supposed to drop at a container lockup. No signature required. For $500 cash, I'm broke. Not stupid. I told them my bike had a flat. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, my voice too high. That's okay. We're here to collect the mandatory safety fee, he said. For small businesses operating in this sector, $1,000 to make sure you stay safe. $1,000. That was food for 3 months. That was 2 bottles of Mabel's heart pills. I had maybe $40 in my account. I don't have it, I whispered. The concrete-faced man sighed. That's a problem. He nodded to the man on his left, who took a slow step toward me. I didn't think. I kicked my bike stand up, threw my messenger bag at the leader's chest, and I ran. I sprinted down the slick pavement, my worn-out sneakers slipping. I heard them behind me, their heavy shoes pounding the concrete, shouting. I didn't look back. Panic was a hot wire in my throat. I cut into a side street, past a fish market that stank of old ice and guts. They were faster than I expected. They were gaining. I burst out onto the curb of Harbor Boulevard, gasping, my lungs on fire. The rain was a solid wall of water. My eyes darted around, desperate, and I saw it. A black sedan, long, expensive, and idling right at the curb, its engine a low, confident purr. Someone was waiting. I didn't care. In one motion, I yanked the back door handle. It was unlocked. I threw myself inside, landing hard on plush leather, and slammed the door shut. Go, I screamed, pounding on the back of the driver's headrest. Please, just drive, go now. The car did not move. I looked up, frantic, to yell again, but the words died. The driver wasn't looking at me. He was looking in the rearview mirror, at someone in the back seat with me. I turned my head. He was sitting in the far corner of the spacious seat, as if he'd been carved from the shadow. He wore a suit so dark it seemed to drink the light. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking out the window as my 3 pursuers skidded to a stop on the sidewalk, their faces twisting in confusion and anger as they saw the car. Then his eyes moved to me. I've seen predators at the aquarium. I've seen the stillness of the octopus before it strikes, the flat, ancient eyes of the sand shark. This man's eyes were calmer than that. They were like the coastal rock at high tide, unmoving, watching the chaos of the ocean crash against it without feeling a thing. This was Ernesto Bartolucci. You don't live in Rainport without knowing the name. It wasn't spoken in the news. It was spoken by the dockhands, by the old men in the Italian cafes, by the cops who looked the other way, the Bartolucci syndicate. Quiet, total. He was a ghost story that ran the city's waterfront, and I had just jumped into his car. He took his time. He looked at the 3-inch tear in my jeans, where my knee was bleeding onto his perfect upholstery. He looked at my hands, streaked with grime and a little cement dust from where I'd stumbled. Then he looked past me, back at the 3 men on the curb. He gave a single, almost invisible nod. The driver, a man built like a vending machine, put the car in gear. The sedan slid away from the curb as smoothly as oil. I looked back through the rain-streaked glass. The 3 inspectors were frozen, watching the most dangerous man in the city drive away with their target. They're following us. I breathed, seeing a beat-up blue pickup truck and a white one pull out from a side street, accelerating hard. The man, Bartolucci, didn't even turn. He just watched the city lights smear past. The inside of the car was silent, except for the hypnotic thwack-thwack of the wipers. It smelled of eucalyptus and something rich, like old-world cologne. He finally spoke. His voice was low, with a gravelly accent I couldn't place. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't ask why those men were chasing me. He asked, "Are you hungry?" I just stared at him, trembling so hard my teeth were rattling. He sighed, as if my silence was an inconvenience. He shrugged off his heavy wool overcoat. It looked like it cost more than my bike, and tossed it over me. It landed with a heavy, warm weight, instantly cocooning me in his scent. You're getting blood on the seat. The chase was short. The sedan moved like a phantom. The driver, Maddox, never seemed to speed, yet we pulled away. He took a hard right into the abandoned container yard at Pier 9. The trucks followed us in, aggressive, and tried to box us in against a wall of rusted red containers. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, a dead end. Bartolucci didn't flinch. He just looked at the woman sitting in the front passenger seat, who I hadn't even registered. Her name, I'd learned, was Yara. She was watching the trucks in the side mirror, her face bored. Ernesto Bartolucci tapped the glass of his window. "Clean this up." Yara and Maddox were out of the car before the pickups had even stopped rolling. It was savagely fast. I saw Yara move like a dancer, breaking the driver's side window of the first truck with her elbow. I heard a dull crack. Maddox took the other 2 from the second truck. There were no guns. I didn't hear any shots. Just the relentless drumming of the rain on the car roof, the scrape of a boot on gravel, and a few wet, heavy sounds that made my stomach heave. In less than a minute, it was over. Yara and Maddox got back in the car, shaking the rain from their coats. "It's done, sir," Maddox said, as if reporting that the dry cleaning was ready. I was shaking, wrapped in his coat, staring at him. "Thank you," I stammered. I didn't know where else to go." He finally smiled. It was small, and it didn't last long. His eyes went to my hair, where a single drop of rain was clinging to a loose strand by my temple. He watched it, mesmerized. "You're safe in my car," he said, his voice soft but absolute. "But you made a mess of my evening." He tilted his head. "From now on, don't run alone." He nodded to Maddox. The car started, navigated around the 2 silent trucks, and headed for the exit. He dropped me at the corner of my street, 2 blocks from my building. "My coat," he said. I scrambled to take it off, fumbling with the heavy wool. I handed it to him. As I did, something slipped from the pocket of my own flimsy jacket. It fell onto the floor of the car with a soft thud. My grandmother's old film camera, a heavy, Silver Pentax from the 1970s, her good luck charm. She'd made me promise to carry it after I got mugged last year. I must have grabbed it along with my keys when I fled my apartment this morning. I reached for it, but Ernesto Bartolucci picked it up first. He held it in his large, clean hands, turning it over, feeling the weight of it. "Get home, Juniper Hale," he said, his eyes on the camera, not on me. I scrambled out of the car, backing away as the door clicked shut. The black sedan pulled away, disappearing into the rain, leaving me alone on the wet street, my heart beating a new, terrified rhythm. He still had my grandmother's camera. I got to the aquarium at 10:45 p.m., the familiar smell of industrial sanitizer and cold. Briny water usually calmed my nerves after a long day on the bike. Tonight, it just felt like another kind of pressurized tank. I kept my head down, trading my bike helmet for a bucket and mop, and tried to focus on the work. I tried to forget the feeling of his wool coat and the quiet finality of his voice. I pushed the mop over the dark tiles of the Amazon River tunnel, the massive shapes of pacu and arowana fish drifting like ghosts above my head. But my reflection in the acrylic wasn't just me. I kept seeing his eyes, calm as coastal rock. I scrubbed harder, the friction squeaking against the floor, trying to erase the memory of what happened at Pier 9. I moved to the walrus tank. Boris and Klondike, the two old males, were asleep on their haul-out rock, their enormous, whiskered faces twitching in a dream. The heavy, rhythmic thrum-thrum-thrum of the main filtration pump was the heartbeat of the building. It was usually my lullaby, a sound so constant it was like silence. Tonight, it just sounded like a high-end engine idling, waiting. I worked until 4 a.m., my shoulders aching, my mind numb. I polished the glass of the jellyfish exhibit until it was invisible. Watching them pulse under the blue lights, I just wanted to get home to Mabel. I just wanted to forget Ernesto Bartolucci. I slept for maybe 3 hours, at 8 in the morning, just as the watery, gray light of the dock line was filtering through our grimy studio window. The knock came. It was not a polite knock. It was a flat-palmed, authoritative slam that rattled the cheap door in its frame. Mabel startled awake in her cot, which immediately triggered her cough. It was a dry, racking sound that scraped my nerves raw. "June," she whispered, clutching the thin blanket to her chest. "Who is that?" "Go back to sleep, Mabel. It's just the super about the faucet." But I knew it was not the super. I pulled on my cleaning hoodie, the one that still smelled faintly of bleach, and went to the door. I looked through the peephole. My blood went cold. It was them, the 3 inspectors from the Urban Integrity Council. Concrete Face was front and center, this time holding a clipboard. I opened the door, but left the chain latch on. "Get away from my door." Concrete Face smiled, that dead-eyed smile. Juniper Hale. He pushed a document at the 4-inch gap. Official notice of delinquent fees. We've assessed the penalty for your use of the public thoroughfare for illegal transport of restricted goods. "I don't transport anything," I hissed, trying to keep my voice down. Mabel was listening. "Your employer, Rainport Legal Couriers, filed the grievance." He lied smoothly. "You used company time and equipment for a side job. It's all here. You owe the city $1,000, plus $200 in late payment penalties, payable immediately." Mabel coughed again. Harder this time. The man heard it. His smile widened. "Look," he said, dropping his voice to a reasonable tone, "we don't want trouble. We just want what's owed. You sign the acknowledgement of debt, and we can work out a payment plan. A few hundred a week." A few hundred a week. I barely made that after rent and Mabel's pills. "If you refuse to sign," he continued, tapping the paper, "we have to file the delinquency report with the City Housing Authority. I hear they're very strict about tenants engaged in criminal activity, especially in subsidized units. They were going to get us evicted. They were going to put my sick grandmother on the street. The panic from yesterday was back, but this time it was cold and sharp. I had nowhere to run. "Give me the pen," I said, my voice dead. I unhooked the chain, took the clipboard, and signed the paper. It looked terrifyingly real. It had thick cardstock, an embossed seal that looked just like the city's, and paragraphs of complex legal jargon. It was all a lie, but it was a lie that could kill us. He tore off the yellow carbon copy and handed it to me. "We'll be in touch about that first payment. Have a safe day. Miss Hale." They walked away, their footsteps heavy and confident on the linoleum hallway floor. I closed the door, locked the deadbolt, and leaned against it, the fake citation trembling in my hand. I knew, deep in my bones, this was not about money, this was about the camera. This was the trap closing. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter an hour later. I ignored it, busy making oatmeal for Mabel. It buzzed again. A text message from a number I did not recognize. It was a picture. My grandmother's camera, the heavy silver Pentax, was sitting on a cloth of deep blue silk. It looked like a museum artifact, gleaming and precious. The text beneath it read, "You left a piece of your heart." My fingers were shaking, but this time with rage. It was him, Bartolucci. He was playing with me just like they were. I typed back, my thumbs clumsy. "Don't contact me, give it back." The reply was instant, silver gull photo, 1 hour. He was not asking. He was telling me. The Silver Gull was 3 blocks over, a tiny, dusty basement shop run by old Sal. It was the only place left in the dock line that still knew how to develop actual film. I told Mabel I was going out to get her prescription. I grabbed the yellow citation, shoved it in my pocket, and ran. The bell above Sal's door tinkled, a cheerful sound in the musty air. He looked up from his counter, his thick glasses magnifying his eyes. "June, you look like you've seen a ghost." "Sal, this is a weird question. Did someone drop off film for me?" "Right here," he said, sliding a standard yellow Kodak envelope across the counter. "Already paid for. Man in a nice suit. Drove a car worth more than this block. Paid cash. Rushed the job." My heart was pounding. "Did you develop it?" "That's the funny part," Sal said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "I took it in the darkroom. It's a roll of T-Max P320, high-speed surveillance film, old police-grade stuff. Haven't seen a roll of this in 15 years. "Police film?" "Yeah, but here's the kicker," Sal said, tapping the envelope. There wasn't a single exposure on it. Not one. It was a blank roll. I stared at the envelope. Blank. None of this made sense. Mabel and I had not used that camera in years. Why were those men trying to kill me for a blank roll of police film? "You kids and your retro projects," Sal chuckled. "Why are you carrying around police film?" "Anyway, it was just in the camera," I stammered. I walked out of the Silver Gull, my mind spinning, and nearly ran right into a solid wall of wool. Ernesto Bartolucci was leaning against the brick wall of the alley opposite the shop, as if he had been waiting there all morning. He was not in a suit. He wore black jeans, a dark gray Henley that fit his broad shoulders, and the same expensive overcoat from last night. He was holding a small paper cup. "He makes terrible coffee," Ernesto said, his voice a low gravel. He held the cup out to me, "But it's hot." I did not take it. "Where is my camera?" "It is not your camera," he said, his voice flat, that same unnerving stillness in his eyes. "Not really." He took a small sip of the coffee, his gaze analytical. "That model, the Pentax K1000 Special Edition, it was issued to Rainport Harbor Patrol investigators in the late 1980s. Only about 500 were made." My breath hitched. "They are rare," he continued, "because they have a false bottom in the battery casing, a hidden compartment." He looked at me, and suddenly, the pieces clicked into place. He was not the one chasing me. He was telling me why I was being chased. "Someone gave that camera to your grandmother a long time ago," he said, his voice quiet. "Someone who wanted it kept safe. Someone who knew she would eventually pass it to you. Those men yesterday, Juniper, they were not chasing you. They were chasing the camera." He reached into his deep coat pocket and pulled it out. The solid silver body felt cold. He handed it to me. "Grip first. They will try again, and they will not hand you paperwork next time." I fumbled with the camera, my hands shaking. I turned it over. I found the latch for the battery compartment on the bottom. It looked normal, but I pushed the metal plate to the left, like he'd implied. There was a tiny secondary click. A small panel, no bigger than my fingernail, popped open. Inside, wrapped in a tiny piece of black electrical tape, was a micro SD card. My blood turned to ice. All this, the chase, the threats, the citation that could make us homeless, for this tiny piece of plastic. I have to take this to the police, I whispered, looking at the card. Ernesto let out a short, sharp laugh. It was not a happy sound. The police, he said. The Urban Integrity Council just handed you official-looking papers threatening your grandmother. Did they not? You think the police are not part of their game. You walk into a precinct with that card. It disappears. And then, so do you. He was right. The citation in my pocket proved he was right. The trap was not just the men in the street. The trap was the whole system. I was caught. What do I do? I looked up at him, hating that I was asking, hating the weakness in my own voice. You come with me, he said. My company has security infrastructure, a clean room. We see what is on the card. We find out who wants you dead, and we use it against them. I can't, I said, my voice breaking. I thought of Mabel, of her cough, of the safety of our small, damp room. I can't get involved in your world, Mr. Bartolucci. You are already involved, he said, his voice dropping, losing its patience. You were involved the moment someone handed you that camera. You just do not have protection. He tossed the rest of his coffee into a gutter. The silence stretched between us, thick with the smell of the harbor and his eucalyptus cologne. It was me, him, and the entire weight of the city. One condition, I said, my voice shaking but finding a sliver of steel. You leave her out of it, my grandmother, Mabel, whatever this is, whatever is on this card. She is not part of it. She is not a bargaining chip. You swear to me. Ernesto Bartolucci looked at me for a long, heavy moment. His gaze was intense, analytical, as if he were measuring my worth. Finally, he nodded. I protect your people first, he said, his voice an absolute promise. Then my honor. He gestured toward a black SUV idling at the end of the alley, its tinted windows making it look like a shadow. I had not even seen it. Let us go find out what is worth more than your life. The black SUV was a vacuum. It sealed out the rain, the smell of the harbor, and the sound of my own thrumming pulse. I sat on the leather, the ancient camera heavy in my lap, and watched the gray, wet streets of the dock line slide by. Ernesto Bartolucci sat beside me, not looking at me, just staring forward as Maddox drove us out of my world and into his. We did not go to a warehouse or a shadowy dockside bar. We drove inland, toward the city center, where the buildings were steel and glass and scraped the low-hanging clouds. The SUV descended into a private subterranean garage, the tires silent on the polished concrete. We stopped in a reserved space marked with a simple, stylized B. The door to the building opened directly from the garage. The sign on the glass was elegant. Sandblasted Bartolucci Maritime and Security. This was his legitimate face, the one that bought ad space in the city's financial journals. It was bright, clean, and far more intimidating than any dark alley. Yara, the woman who had moved like a phantom at the container yard, met us at the elevator. She and Maddox flanked us. We went down, not up, deep into the sub-basement. The air grew colder, drier. Yara used a key card, then a thumbprint scanner. A heavy steel door hissed open, revealing a room that was nothing but glass walls, sterile steel tables, and the low, constant hum of air filtration. It smelled like ozone and new plastic. A man, young, maybe my age, with restless eyes and hair pulled back in a tight knot, was waiting. He was surrounded by a fortress of servers and monitors. Kaido, Ernesto said, by way of introduction. He finds things. Kaido did not say hello. He just looked at the micro SD card I was holding, his fingers drumming on his steel keyboard. I walked forward and placed the tiny, tape-wrapped square on a metal tray. He picked it up with a pair of delicate tweezers, as if it were a piece of shrapnel, and slid it into a heavy black card reader that looked like it belonged to the military. "Encrypted," Kaito murmured, his eyes scanning the lines of code that immediately flooded his main screen. "Standard 7-layer, amateur." He typed, his fingers a blur. The screen flickered, and then folders appeared. Ernesto stood behind me. I did not need to look. I could feel the solid presence of him, the radiating warmth that cut the room's chill. "What is it?" Ernesto asked. "It is a shadow ledger," Kaito said, his voice flat. He clicked open a file, extortion payments, dates, names, amounts. He clicked a subfolder labeled Field Audits. My stomach clenched. A video file opened. The perspective was low, jerky, filmed from chest height, body cam footage. I saw the face of the man who had cornered me. Concrete face, in the video. He was standing in Mrs. Petrov's bakery, the one on my delivery route. He was smiling his dead-eyed smile at the old woman. "The Urban Integrity Council needs to ensure supply chain integrity." "Ma'am," his voice, tinny and metallic, came from the speakers. "This month's compliance fee is $500. "It is a full-scale shakedown," Yara said, her arms crossed as she watched the screen. "The Urban Integrity Council is a ghost, a front." "For who?" I whispered, my mouth dry. Kaito didn't answer, and he was already tracing the money. He brought up a complex flowchart. All payments, cash and digital, are routed through a series of shells, but they all end up here. He maximized an image. It was a logo, a stylized drawing of a bird, all sharp angles, landing on a patch of green, the Green Shoal Foundation. "A fake environmental nonprofit," Ernesto stated. It was not a question. "A rival organization," Yara clarified, her eyes fixed on the screen. "The Black Turn Collective. They have been trying to get a foothold in the dockline for a year. This is how they are funding it, using this council to bleed the businesses Bartolucci Maritime usually protects." My blood ran cold. I had not just run from thugs. I had run from Ernesto's enemies, and I had fallen directly into his car, carrying their entire playbook. Kaito kept digging, pulling up more files. "They are getting arrogant. They are using forged supply contracts to launder the money from the Green Shoal account, making it look like legitimate expenses." He opened a PDF, a contract for $2,000 worth of industrial sanitation chemicals for a logistics company. My eyes flew to the bottom of the page, to the digital authorization stamp. My heart stopped. I knew that signature. I had seen it on apartment leases and bar tabs and birthday cards. Daria Quinn. The name felt like swallowing dust. Daria, my old roommate, my best friend, for a while. We had shared cheap pizza and big dreams in a tiny studio apartment, promising each other we would own this city. Then she got in trouble. Gambling debts and the wrong kind of boyfriends. She started borrowing money she could not repay. 6 months ago, she vanished, leaving me with 2 months of back rent and a broken lease. Ernesto must have seen my face collapse. His voice came from just behind my ear, low and soft, vibrating through me. "How well do you trust your friend?" I stared at Daria's looping, confident D on the fraudulent contract. "We were like sisters," I whispered, the admission tasting bitter until she disappeared. "She owes me over $1,000. Yara looked at me, her expression hard and assessing. "She's not your friend, girl. She's their accountant." "There is more," Kaito said, his voice sharp, pulling my attention back. "This ledger is not just a record, it is a plan. They are scheduling a major disbursement." He highlighted a line on the spreadsheet. "A massive payment pending in 3 days, the night of the Festival of Sea Lights." "The festival," Yara said, nodding. "The harbor patrol will be focused on the parade of boats. The streets will be packed. A perfect time to move a shipment." Kaito confirmed it. "A large cargo transfer is scheduled for Pier Larkspur. This final payment from Green Shoal is the go-ahead." Pier Larkspur. That was Black Turn territory, but it was dangerously close to the aquarium, close to my home. Ernesto nodded slowly, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. He looked at Yara. Good. We have leverage. We leak the existence of this ledger to the Black Turns. We show them we have their entire financial structure, their payroll. We trade the data for their immediate retreat from the dock line. Clean, simple. He was going to blackmail them. He was going to use this nightmare, my nightmare, as a bargaining chip in his turf war. I thought of Mrs. Petrov. I thought of the terrified contractor I saw in the other video. I thought of the yellow citation in my pocket, the one threatening to put Mabel on the street. No. The word was quiet, but in the cold, humming room, it sounded like a gunshot. Kaido and Yara froze. Ernesto Bartolucci turned his head, his eyes fixing on me. His expression was not angry. It was blank, which was worse. What did you say? I turned to face him fully. I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. He was a mountain in the cold light of the clean room. You cannot just trade it, I said, my voice shaking but gaining strength. They threatened my grandmother. They are terrorizing those people in the videos. They stole their money. I want them to pay it back. I am not a bank, Juniper, he said, his voice dangerously soft. I am handling a threat to my business. And I am not one of your soldiers, I shot back, my own anger surprising me. I am the one they cornered. I am the one they are trying to frame. This is my fight now, too. You do not get to use this. My camera, my life, just to move your pieces around the board. Those people are scared. They deserve justice. We have the proof. I expected him to yell, to have Maddox throw me out. Instead, he just watched me, his dark eyes unreadable. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the servers. He was assessing me, weighing me. Then, he looked away from me, back at the glowing screen. He stared at the Green Shoal Foundation logo for a long, heavy 10 seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice was changed. It was no longer soft. It was iron. She is right, he said, looking at Yara. Leverage is temporary. Annihilation is permanent. If we cut off their money, we sever the head of the snake. Yara looked confused. Sir, the shipment. The shipment at Larkspur is a distraction, Ernesto said, cutting her off. The money is the target. Kaido. What is the current liquid balance in the Green Shoal account? Kaido's fingers flew. Based on these inflow logs, approximately $1.2 million, maybe more. Ernesto smiled. It was a cold, sharp expression. Yara. Your role has changed. You are no longer a bodyguard. You are a lawyer again. Yara's entire posture shifted, her boredom melting away, replaced by a predatory focus. I want a blitzkrieg civil suit, Ernesto commanded. We find every single victim on this ledger, starting with Mrs. Petrov from the bakery. We will represent them all, pro bono. We file an emergency injunction against the Green Shoal Foundation for fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. I want every asset they have frozen by the time the first firework goes up at the Festival of Sea Lights. Yara's lips curved into a thin, dangerous smile. A lawsuit. That is public. It is clean. It is righteous, Ernesto corrected her. We will use their own system against them. We will use the law. He turned back to me, the full force of his attention landing on me like a physical weight. You wanted them to pay. Juniper. This is how they pay. He was not going to hide. He was not going to make a backroom deal. He was going to declare war in broad daylight. What do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You are the field consultant, he said. Yara needs victims who are willing to sign on as plaintiffs. You know the dock line. You know these streets. You will find the people from those videos. You will convince them that it is safe to fight back. He was asking me to go back out there, not to ride and hide, but to knock on doors, to face the very terror that had sent me running. They will be too scared, I said, thinking of Mrs. Petrov's trembling hands. So are you, Ernesto replied, his voice softening just a fraction, but you are still standing here. He was right. I looked down at my hands. For the first time in 2 days, they were not shaking. I hated bringing Mabel into his world. Her cough had grown worse in the damp studio, a persistent, rattling sound that kept me awake at nights I actually tried to sleep. Ernesto had been insistent, his voice flat and non-negotiable over the phone. She needs a specialist, not a walk-in. Now, we were sitting in the waiting room of the Harbor Light Clinic. It was not a dockline clinic. It was uptown, in a building with a marble lobby, and the waiting room smelled of clean linen and faint, expensive polish. Not ammonia and despair. The chairs were cushioned. I watched Ernesto sign her in, his signature a sharp, confident slash. The receptionist did not ask for an insurance card. She just looked at him and nodded, her eyes wide with a terrifying, immediate respect. Mabel, however, was unfazed by him. She sat straight in her chair, her thin hands folded over her worn purse, and she just studied him. "June," she whispered, leaning close to me. The scent of her lavender soap was a small comfort. "That young man, he has quiet eyes, like your grandfather's." I looked at Ernesto, who was standing by the window, his back to us, a silent sentinel. "You can trust quiet eyes, June," Mabel finished, patting my hand. I wanted to tell her that his eyes were quiet because they had seen things that would make the rest of us scream. I wanted to tell her this clinic, with its clean floors and smiling nurses, was probably paid for by the same syndicate that had broken those men at the container yard, but I just squeezed her hand. "The doctor here is the best. Mabel." While Mabel was in with the cardiologist, a man who looked like he genuinely owned a boat, I waited in the hallway. Ernesto did not sit. He prowled the corridor, not with agitation, but with a contained energy. He was not a man built for waiting rooms. I watched him. A small boy, waiting for his mother, was crying softly, his face pressed into the vinyl chair. Ernesto did not approach him. He just walked over to the children's area, where a small wooden activity table was missing a piece. He found the rogue wooden block near the water fountain, picked it up, and silently placed it back in its slot. Later, an elderly man in a wheelchair was struggling, trying to read a newspaper on a wobbly bedside table. The leg was loose. I watched Ernesto notice it. He paused, knelt, and examined the joint. He disappeared into a supply closet and returned 1 minute later with a small, flathead screwdriver. He knelt by the old man, tightened the screws, and tested the table for stability. It was solid. The old man began thanking him in a rapid, grateful mix of Spanish and Italian. Ernesto replied in the same hybrid language, his voice low and respectful, something about old wood needing care. He was a myth of violence and shadows, and here he was, on his knees, fixing a broken chair in a charity clinic he secretly funded. That night, he took me to the roof of his headquarters. It was not a penthouse garden. It was a gym, open to the elements on one side, looking out over the entire glittering expanse of the Rainport docks. The lights of the cargo cranes and the container ships moved like constellations below us. Silent and distant, the wind was cold. "You cannot be a target, daste," what he said. He stood in the center of a large rubber mat, the wind pulling at his dark shirt. "You cannot run every time. You must be a participant." He was teaching me how to break a grip. "They will grab your wrist first," he said. "It is instinct," he demonstrated, his hand closing around my left wrist. His grip was not violent, but it was absolute, a manacle of flesh and bone. "Now, you are weaker than they are. Do not fight their strength. Find the thumb, the weak point." I struggled, pulling back, but it was like pulling against a steel tow cable. "You are fighting me," he said, his voice patient. "Do not use my own joint against me." He repositioned my hand on his own wrist. He was close enough that I could smell the eucalyptus again, mixed with the cold, salty air of the harbor. His fingers adjusted my grip, his touch dry and warm against my cold skin. "Like this." He held my wrist at the precise angle, forcing me to feel the mechanics of the joint. He paused, his gaze locking with mine, the entire city glittering below us. "Okay." His voice was low, barely a breath. It was the softest word I had ever heard him say. It was a question, not a command. It was permission. I nodded, my throat tight. "Now," he commanded, his voice back to iron. I twisted, using the leverage he had shown me. He let his arm turn, showing me the motion. Good, again. We trained for an hour. My muscles ached with a new, sharp exhaustion. I finally understood that his control, the way he drove, the way he spoke, the way he commanded Yara and Maddox was not about owning things. It was about preventing chaos from touching him. He was a seawall, built of discipline and shadow, and I was, for the moment, living behind it. "I am still working at the aquarium," I said as we stood by the ledge, catching our breath. The wind whipped my hair across my face. "I need to... for Mabel. For me. I am not quitting." I expected an argument. I expected him to say it was unsafe, to forbid it. Ernesto just watched the slow crawl of a container ship far below. "I know," he said. "They will not touch you there. I will have eyes on the tanks. You keep what is yours." He did not try to possess me. He was just guarding the perimeter. But the perimeter was not as secure as he thought. The next evening, it was raining again. That cold, persistent rainport mist that sinks into your bones. I was unlocking the deadbolt on my studio door. My knuckles bruised and stiff from the rooftop mat. A box was sitting on my worn welcome mat. It was not a cardboard delivery. It was a white florist's box, elegant, wrapped in a thick black ribbon. My heart stopped. Ernesto was in his SUV at the curb, a silent shadow, waiting for me to get inside safely before he left. I did not move. I just stared at the box. I waved him up. He took the stairs 2 at a time, moving with a fluid, lethal speed I had not seen before. He saw the box, saw my face, and pushed me gently behind him. He nudged the box with his foot. Then he bent down, untied the ribbon, and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on black tissue paper, was a spray of bright red begonias and a small, white, embossed card. "Open the camera again." They knew. They knew the camera was the source. They knew where I lived. They knew I had the card. I started to tremble, a deep, bone-rattling shudder that made me sick. "They know where I live," I whispered. "Oh, God, they know about Mabel." Ernesto's face went perfectly, terrifyingly still. That stillness I had seen in his car was back, but this time, it was not rock. It was glacial ice. "Not anymore," he said. He did not raise his voice. He took out his phone and made one call. "Yara, satellite package, the studio, now." He looked at me, his eyes dark. "You're not staying here tonight, and neither is Mabel." Within 1 hour, my life was compartmentalized and locked down. A small, discreet security camera, no bigger than a quarter, appeared above my doorframe. My grandmother was assigned a new home health aide, a woman named Neela with a kind, gentle smile and the hardest eyes I had ever seen. Ernesto took my phone, handed me a new one, a heavy, anonymous-looking device. "Virtual route," he said. "It scrubs your location data. Never use your old phone again. It is compromised." He did not take us to a safe house. He said we were compromising the investigation by staying in the dock line. I knew we were bait. He was refusing to leave in the trap. He moved us to a residential hotel he owned uptown, a place with thick carpets and thicker walls. That night, he insisted I eat, not in the room. "We do not hide, Juniper," he said, waiting by the elevator. "We operate Wartiawi." We went to Violetta on Crane Street. It was small, just a dozen tables, dark wood, and a single candle on each one. It was the opposite of his world. It was quiet, too quiet. "Why are you doing this?" I asked him, the candlelight catching the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "This lawsuit, Yara said it is expensive. It is public. It makes you a target, too." Ernesto looked down at his water glass, tracing the rim with one finger. "When I was 17 years old," he said. His voice so quiet I had to lean in. "My father and I were on our fishing boat, A 30-foot trawler, a storm came up fast, a nor'easter. The radio was screaming with distress calls. We saw a flare, red, about 1 mile out, a small boat, a single fisherman, his engine dead. He paused, his eyes focused on a memory. My father said it was too late, that the waves would swamp us, that we had to save ourselves. He turned the boat for home. He looked up, and his eyes met mine. I took the wheel from him. I pulled that man out of the water. He was half frozen. My father did not speak to me for a month, but the man lived. He leaned forward, the candle illuminating the hard lines of his face. I do not like leaving people in the storm, Juniper. We left the restaurant just after 9 p.m. The street was slick with rain, the neon signs of the neighboring shops blurring on the wet pavement. Maddox was waiting with the SUV, the engine idling. I felt a moment of calm, the first in days, the warmth of the wine, the weight of his story. I almost felt normal. Then I heard it. A high-pitched, electric whining like a giant angry mosquito. "What is that?" I said, looking up at the dark sky. Ernesto looked up at the same time. His body went rigid. He grabbed my arm. "Down," he yelled. He threw himself at me, shoving me hard against the brick wall of the restaurant, his entire body covering mine, pressing me into the rough brick. A second later, something small and black slammed into the striped canvas awning right above where we had been standing. There was a sharp crack, a pop, and a flash of white-hot light. It was not a bomb, not a gunshot. It was a drone. It exploded with just enough force to shred the awning and send pieces of hot, molten plastic raining down onto the sidewalk. It crashed onto the pavement in smoking, sparking pieces. A small, digitized voice screeched from the wreckage, a horrifying, looping sound. "Give back the data! Give back the data! Give back the data!" I was shaking, pinned between the brick and the solid, immovable wall of his chest. His heart was hammering against my back, or maybe it was mine. I could not tell. He did not move for a full 10 seconds. He just stayed there, shielding me, his breath hot on my neck. Then, slowly, he straightened up. He looked at the smoking debris on the sidewalk, then at me. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. His quiet eyes were gone. They were burning. "They have crossed my threshold of forgiveness," he said, his voice a low, lethal promise. "They put their hands on you. Now I take their hands." The plan was supposed to be clean. Yara had cultivated a reliable source inside the district attorney's civil fraud division, a clerk with a taste for high-stakes sports betting, for a canceled debt of $10,000. This clerk made a single, panicked phone call to a number on the Black Turn payroll. He warned them that the Bartolucci suit was moving faster than expected, and that the original, damning evidence, the SD card, was being moved tonight, at 2 a.m., to a secure digital forensics lab. The handoff was scheduled for Ice Warehouse 7 at Pier Larkspur. It was a lie. The real card was safe in Kaido's deepest server. The card in my jacket pocket was a copy, loaded with corrupted data. I was the bait. "I am going alone," I had insisted, staring Ernesto down in the sterile light of the clean room. "You are not," he'd countered, his voice a low growl. "I will be on you." "They know your face, your men, your cars. If they even smell Bartolucci, they will kill the deal and disappear. Daria knows me. She trusts me to be weak. It has to be me, or it is not believable." He had stared at me, his jaw set so hard a muscle jumped. He was losing the argument, and he knew it. One condition: you wear the tether. So here I was, walking down the long, lightless expanse of Pier Larkspur. The air was thick with the smell of diesel, low tide, and something metallic. Ice. Warehouse 7 was a vast, windowless box of corrugated tin, its refrigeration units humming a low, droning note that vibrated in my teeth. It was 20 minutes past 2 in the morning. Ernesto's team was here, but they were invisible. They were night shift workers. I had seen them on the way in, a sanitation truck cleaning the street 2 blocks back, a man in welder's gear, his torch sparking rhythmically as he repaired a chain-link fence. Kaito was flying a silent, high-altitude drone, a black speck against the dark clouds, giving Ernesto an infrared feed of the entire pier. And I had the tether. It was a thin, Kevlar line, almost invisible, spooled from a device on my belt and clipped to my jacket seam. It was my leash. Ernesto was at the other end of it, hidden in the shadows of a container crane 100 yards away. The massive, sliding door of the warehouse groaned open on its rusted track. A slice of yellow light cutting the dark. The blast of cold air that hit me was a physical blow, 20 degrees and sharp with the scent of frozen fish. They were waiting inside, 2 of them, standing under a single, buzzing fluorescent work light. The first was the man Kaito had identified as Rowan Pike, the head of the Black Turn Collective. He was thin, wired, with a sharp, bird-like face that was all nose and frantic eyes. He wore an expensive suit, but it looked wrong on him, like he was playing dress-up. The second was Daria. My breath hitched. She was not the girl I remembered, the one who cried over bad grades and ate cereal out of the box. This Daria was sculpted from ice. Her hair was a severe platinum blonde, pulled back so tight it stretched her skin. Her coat was long, black, and perfect. She looked beautiful, and she looked empty. She smiled when she saw me, a thin, red-lipped expression that held 0 warmth and 1,000 miles of pity. "June," she said, her voice echoing in the vast, frozen cavern, bouncing off the plastic-wrapped pallets of fish. "My God, you are still a Girl Scout, aren't you? You still trust people?" "Hello, Daria," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. I kept my hand in my jacket pocket, my fingers wrapped around the decoy card. "And this is the bait," Pike snapped, his voice high and reedy. He looked me up and down with obvious disgust. "She looks like nothing." "She is the one who had the card," Daria said, her eyes never leaving mine. "And she is stupid enough to trade it. She always did want to save everyone." "The card," Pike demanded, taking a step forward. "Give it to me, and we let you walk away. Maybe." I did not move. My heart was a frantic bird against my ribs. "The letters first." Pike stopped. "What?" "The letters," I repeated, my voice shaking, but I held my ground. "Yara sent you the list. 22 businesses, Mrs. Petrov's Bakery, Sal's Photo Shop. I want signed, notarized letters of debt cancellation for all of them, wiping their slates clean." Daria actually laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "You're in a freezer, June, surrounded by 1,000 tons of fish, and you are trying to negotiate. You really are pathetic." "That is the deal," I said, gripping the card. "You get the ledger, and the people you terrorized get their lives back. Or I walk. And at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Ernesto Bartolucci's lawyers will file an injunction that will freeze your fake Green Shoal Foundation so solid not even you can crack it." The mention of Ernesto's name changed the air. Pike's frantic energy focused into a single, sharp point of malice. "You stupid little girl," he hissed. "You think you are in charge here." He moved. He was impossibly fast. He was not reaching for a gun. His hand went to his ankle, and when it came up, it was holding a thin, 9-inch stiletto knife. He lunged, not at my throat, but at my pocket. He was going to cut the card and my hand right off me. Time stopped. I heard Ernesto's voice from the rooftop gym. "Do not fight their strength. Find the thumb, the weak point, step inside the strike." I did not retreat. As his arm flashed toward me, I stepped in, dropping my center of gravity. I clamped my left hand onto his wrist, trapping the knife hand. Then, as he tried to pull back and gut me, I used his own momentum. Pivoting on my hip, I brought my right forearm up and smashed it down onto his elbow joint from above. It was the move he had taught me, the one to break a grip. I heard a sound, a wet, horrifying pop. Rowan Pike screamed. It was a shrill, bird-like shriek of pure agony. His arm bent the wrong way. The knife clattered to the ice-slicked concrete. It bought me 2 seconds. Daria's eyes went wide with shock. Crash! The massive rolling door of the warehouse slammed shut, plunging the cavern into almost total darkness. Ernesto. At the exact same instant, I heard a series of soft thumps from the rafters above, then a sharp smoke. Thick, white smoke began to pour down from vents, instantly obscuring everything. It did not smell like fire. It was chemical. It smelled of sharp, synthetic mint, Kaito's diversion. "June!" Daria screamed, her voice choked and terrified in the dark. "Pike getter." A hand grabbed my jacket. I yelled, blind, trying to twist away. Then the tether engaged. I was yanked off my feet as if by a giant, invisible hook. I flew backward, dragged across the concrete floor, my boots scraping, pulling me away from the chaos. I was choking on the mint smoke, disoriented. As I was being pulled, Pike, screaming in blind rage, lunged for me again with his good hand. I saw his shape in the swirling smoke. I acted on pure, raw instinct. I reached out and grabbed his attacking hand. I felt something hard and cold on his finger. A ring. I ripped it off. I yanked it from his hand, a primal act of defiance. My fist closed around the heavy piece of metal just as I was pulled through a narrow side door. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, sealing off the screams and the hissing smoke. I landed hard on the gravel of an access corridor. I was coughing, my lungs burning from the mint, my entire body shaking. The corridor was dark, lit only by a single red exit sign. It smelled of rust and cold, briny seawater. Ernesto was there, reeling in the tether, his face a mask of dark, controlled fury. He pulled me to my feet, his hands moving over me, checking for wounds. "Are you cut? Did he touch you?" His voice was a low, rough rasp. "No," I gasped, my throat raw. "No, I got his arm. The move. It worked." He did not smile, just stared at me, his chest heaving, his eyes burning in the dim red light. He saw the terror shaking my hands, the adrenaline making me vibrate. He reached out and placed his large, warm hand on the back of my neck, his thumb pressing hard into the tense muscle at the base of my skull. It was not gentle. It was an anchor, a claim. "You did better than the plan," he said, his voice raw. "You listened. Now we go." We were back in the penthouse, high above the sleeping city, before the adrenaline finally left me. I had been silent the entire ride, my fist clamped shut. When the elevator doors opened to his apartment, the shaking started. Ernesto bypassed the lights. He went to the bar, poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a heavy glass, and pressed it into my hand. "Drink." The liquor burned, but it stopped the chattering of my teeth. "I was so scared," I whispered, staring out at the billion lights of Rainport. "He is a snake," Ernesto said, his voice tight. He was watching me, not the view. "You were right to be." "No," I said, turning to him. "You do not understand." I held up my hand, the one that had broken a man's arm. It was still shaking. I was terrified, but when he came at me, I was not waiting for you to save me. I opened my shaking fist. On my palm, glinting in the faint light from the city, sat a heavy gold signet ring. It was carved with the image of a tern, its wings spread, diving. "I was thinking about what you taught me," I said, my voice hoarse, finding a new, strange resonance. I was scared, Ernesto, but I felt alive, for the first time. I was not running. I was not behind you. I was standing next to you. He looked from my face down to the ring. He knew what it was. Physical evidence. A trophy. Proof. He slowly reached out and closed his large hand over mine, his fingers enveloping my fist, his skin warm and solid against mine. He held it, the ring pressed between our palms. "Good," he said, his voice a low rumble in the darkness, "because now we end this." The night after the warehouse, the storm that had been threatening Rainport for a week finally broke. It did not just rain, it was a full-scale assault. The wind howled off the ocean, a living thing, a chorus of angry ghosts. It slammed against the thick, curved glass of the beacon house. Ernesto had brought me here, to this relic, an old lighthouse on the city's most desolate point, converted into a private, fortified safe house. It was all solid gray stone, worn wood and brass. It was the opposite of his glass penthouse. This place was built to withstand a siege. I stood by the enormous, curved window, watching the waves explode against the rocks below, the white foam illuminated by the lighthouse's own sweeping, automated beam. I was still vibrating from the night before the pop of Pike's arm, the ring heavy in my pocket, the look in Ernesto's eyes when I had said I felt alive. A log in the massive stone fireplace snapped, a gunshot sound that made me jump. The lights in the round room, old, warm. Edison-style bulbs sputtered, they flickered, buzzed, and died. We were plunged into darkness save for the orange, dancing light of the fire and the rhythmic, silent sweep of the beam outside. The storm's howl seemed to double in volume, rushing in to fill the silence. Ernesto was standing across the room, near the hearth, a dark, solid shape against the flames. He had been watching me. Not the storm. He did not move for a full minute. "They cannot find us here," and he said, his voice a low rumble, distinct from the wind. "The systems are self-contained. The walls are 3 feet thick. You are safe." He was offering me an exit from the intimacy. Not just the danger. He was telling me I did not have to be afraid of him. I said nothing, just hugged my arms to my chest. He took a step, not toward me, but toward the door that led to the winding staircase. He created distance. He gave me an escape route. "Do you want to be here, Juniper?" he asked. It was the first question. It meant, do you want to be in this fortress, hidden from the world? I thought of my damp studio. I thought of the menacing drone. "I do not want to be out there," I whispered. He nodded, accepting this. He turned back to the fire, but he was restless. He was a man of action, and we were now in a holding pattern. I was, too. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a humming, electric tension that had nothing to do with Rowan Pike or the Black Turns. It was just us, the man and the woman, the storm, the fire. I walked, my bare feet silent on the worn oriental rug, until I was standing near the fireplace, close enough to feel the heat on my face. He looked at me, his eyes dark pools that reflected the flickering flames. He could have reached out and touched me. He could have closed the distance in a single step. He did not. He put his hands in his pockets. "Do you want to be here?" he asked again. The second question, his voice was quieter. It meant something different. "Do you want to be here, in this room, with me?" I looked at his hands, hidden in his pockets. Hands that had shown me how to break a man's arm, hands that had fixed a wobbly table for an old man, hands that had been gentle and respectful on the rooftop. My own hands were trembling slightly. I was not afraid. I was aware of him, of the fact that I was not running. I nodded, just a small, single dip of my chin. He took his hands out of his pockets. He held one out, palm up, in the space between us. It was not a command. It was an offer. He waited. The wind screamed, the fire crackled. He just waited. I took a breath, a deep, shuddering inhale that tasted of salt and wood smoke, and I made my choice. I stepped forward. I did not just take his hand. I threaded my fingers through his, lacing our palms together. His skin was warm, his grip strong as he reflexively closed it around mine. I did not stop there. I used our joined hands to pull him, gently, toward me, until we were standing only inches apart. His breath hitched. It was the smallest sound, almost lost in the storm, but I heard it. The man of absolute control was surprised. He raised his other hand, the free one, and moved it toward my face. He stopped, his fingers hovering an inch from my skin. He was waiting, again. Always waiting. I leaned my head forward, pressing my cheek into his palm. His hand was rough, calloused, and incredibly warm. He let out that breath, a slow sigh, and his hand finally closed, cupping my jaw. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine in the firelight. "June," he whispered, his voice thick. "Do you want to be here?" The third question, it meant everything. "Yes," I whispered. He bent his head. I thought he would kiss me. He did not. He pressed his forehead against mine. We stood there, breathing each other's air, our brows touching, our hands locked together. His heart was a slow, heavy, powerful beat. It was not the frantic, terrified rhythm of my own life. It was a lighthouse beam, steady, relentless. His gaze dropped to my other hand, the one not holding his. I had been clenching it at my side. He gently unlaced our fingers, only to take my other hand, turning it over. The firelight illuminated the calluses on my palm, the red, rough patches from my bike's handlebars, the chemical raw skin from the aquarium mops. They were the map of my exhaustion. "These are beautiful," he murmured, his voice rough with an emotion I could not name. "A badge of honor. They prove you are real, that you have lived." And he bent his head, not to my lips, but to my hand. He kissed the center of my palm, then slowly, respectfully. He kissed each callus, each ridge of hardened skin. It was not a kiss of passion. It was an act of reverence. It was a pledge. He was honoring the part of me that had fought to survive, the part that was just a courier, just a cleaner. A tremor ran through me, a wave of heat that had nothing to do with the fire. "I am here," he whispered against my skin. "Me too," I whispered back. His hand left my jaw and slid down, his arm encircling my waist, pulling me fully against him. It was solid, possessive, and yet I felt no fear. I felt anchored. I leaned my head against his chest, right over that steady heart, and my own frantic pulse finally began to slow. We stood like that for a long time, just breathing. The storm raged outside, a wild, chaotic symphony, but inside, in the circle of his arms, there was only the steady rhythm of his heart and the crackle of the fire. There was a long, cushioned window seat built into the curve of the lighthouse wall. He guided me there, never breaking contact. We sat, and he pulled a heavy wool blanket from the back of the couch, wrapping it around us both. He pulled me against his side, my head fitting perfectly into the space on his shoulder. We sat in silence, two survivors in a stone tower, and just watched the storm. We watched the sea explode. A massive crack of thunder rattled the very stones of the lighthouse, and in the blinding white flash of lightning that followed, he looked down at me. I did not know I was smiling until I saw the look of wonder on his face. It was a small, tired, but very real smile. I had faced a monster in a freezer. I had felt the heat of an exploding drone, and here, in the heart of a hurricane, pressed against the most dangerous man in Rainport, I felt, for the first time in my life, completely and utterly safe. The intensity of the moment, the raw intimacy of it, was a storm all its own. After the lightning faded, he pulled the blanket tighter, his hand coming up to rest on my hair, his fingers gently stroking the damp strands. "Anytime you say stop, we stop," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. A vow in the dark. "Always, Juniper. That is my promise to you." I tilted my head back, looking up at the strong line of his jaw, silhouetted by the fire. I thought of his power. I thought of his violence. And I thought of his hand, hovering, waiting for my consent. "I choose you," I whispered. It was the truth. I was not here because he had rescued me. I was not here because he was protecting me. I was here because he was the only man I had ever met who had seen the calluses on my hands and called them beautiful. I was here because he respected my choices. He did not reply. He just tightened his arm, pulling me impossibly closer. We fell asleep like that, on the couch in the round room, lulled by the sound of the wind and the rain. When I woke, the storm had broken. Pale, watery dawn was filtering through the round window, painting the room in soft gray and gold. I was still wrapped in his arms, his steady breath warm on my hair, and the world, for the first time, felt solid beneath me. Yara did not sleep. While Ernesto and I were lost in the storm at the lighthouse, She was waging a war on paper. At 9 a.m. sharp, her team of hungry, young, Bartolucci-funded lawyers filed a class-action civil suit in the Title District Court. They did not just file, they presented an emergency petition, ex parte, with a mountain of evidence, Kaito's entire ledger, Pike's signet ring, which I had handed over, my hand still shaking, and 22 sworn, notarized affidavits from the terrorized shop owners I had spent the previous day convincing to fight back. By noon, Judge Alistair Thorne, a man known for his zero-tolerance policy on financial crimes, signed the temporary restraining order. The Green Shoal Foundation's accounts, all $1.2 million, were frozen. Pike's war chest was gone. But freezing the money was not enough. Ernesto wanted to destroy the idea of them. That night was the Clean Seas Gala, the Green Shoal Foundation's biggest fundraising event of the year. It was their moment to launder their reputation, to rub elbows with the city's old money and political elite. It was held on a 200-foot private yacht, the Odyssey, chartered for the occasion. And we were going. They will not expect this, Ernesto had said, handing me a simple, severe box. They expect us to hide. We will walk into their house and dismantle it, brick by brick. I did not feel like Juniper Hale, the courier, the cleaner. When I looked in the mirror, the woman looking back was a stranger. She wore a minimalist suit of dark, midnight blue silk. My hair was pulled back in a tight, severe knot, just like Daria's, a deliberate echo. I wore no jewelry, just the deep, new bruises on my forearm from Pike's grip. Ernesto stood beside me at the mirror. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He looked like the myth he was, a prince of shadows. He did not say I looked beautiful. He just met my eyes in the reflection. "You look like a participant, Maliker," he said. We were the storm. We walked up the gangplank of the Odyssey at precisely 8:30 p.m. The chatter on the deck, a symphony of clinking champagne glasses and false laughter, died. It did not just quiet down, it ceased. 100 of Rainport's wealthiest citizens turned as one to stare at us. They saw Ernesto Bartolucci, the phantom of the docks, the man who was never seen at social events, walking into the heart of their world, and on his arm was me, the nobody who had, in the last 48 hours, become the fuse. Rowan Pike was on the upper deck, his arm in a pristine white sling, his bird-like face a mask of pale, sweaty fury. His one good hand was clenched around a champagne flute. Our eyes met across the crowded deck. He knew. But I was not looking for Pike. I was looking for Daria. I found her near the stern, by a lavish display of shrimp on ice. She was laughing, holding court with a city councilman, looking radiant in a backless silver dress. When she saw me, her laughter froze, the blood draining from her face. I walked toward her, a ghost from her past. The councilman melted away, sensing the sudden drop in temperature. "June," she hissed, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "What are you doing here? You are supposed to be hiding. You are supposed to be scared." "I was," I said, my voice low and clear, just for her. "Then I got angry. You helped build this. Daria, you helped them threaten my grandmother." "I built my escape," she spat, her composure cracking. "You think I wanted to share cheap pizza with you forever? You think I like being poor? Like you, this was my way out," and she tapped a leather portfolio at her side. "I am their ethics consultant, supply chain integrity. I get a 20% commission on every donation I vet. It is all legal. I am untouchable." "You mean you get a 20% cut of the money they extorted from Mrs. Petrov's bakery?" I said. "That is the cost of business," she shrieked, losing control. "I earned this. I earned my way out. And you little nothing, you and your mafia boyfriend are trying to pull me back down." "Is that your official statement?" I asked. Her face crumpled in confusion. "What?" I lifted my new phone, which had been recording our entire conversation. The small red light was glowing. "I just need to be sure the court hears your side. Daria, as their ethics consultant." Her face went from white to a deep, mottled red. She lunged for the phone, but she was too slow. I was already walking away, melting back into the crowd, leaving her standing alone by the shrimp, her mask of ice completely shattered. I found Ernesto by the main mast. I nodded, he nodded back. "It is time," he said. He looked up at the main stage, where a bland, smiling man was at a podium, droning on about saving the manatees. Ernesto looked at his watch. "Now, Kaito." On the stage, the massive LED screen behind the speaker suddenly went black. The man at the podium tapped the microphone. Seems we have a small technical difficulty." The screen flickered. It did not return to the logo of a smiling dolphin. It returned as a map, a live, pulsing diagram of Rainport's financial network. Lines of light representing money were moving. I saw the names of the shell companies from the ledger, and I saw them all converging through the Green Shoal Foundation to a single offshore account. The account was labeled in stark white, 100-point font R, Pike, personal. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. People were pointing, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their mouths. "This is," the man at the podium stammered, "this is not our presentation." "It is now," Ernesto's voice boomed, clear and cold across the silent deck. He had not shouted, he had just spoken. "That," he said, pointing to the screen, "is your Clean Seas Gala. It is a money laundering machine. The Urban Integrity Council that has been terrorizing the docks is a front, and the Green Shoal Foundation is the bank. You are all funding the Black Turn Collective." Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. The crowd surged, a wave of diamonds and tuxedos, pushing for the gangplank. The captain, a man with a face like worn leather, was screaming into his radio, cutting the music, ordering his men to secure the deck. I saw Pike, and he was not running. He was coming for me. He moved through the chaos like a shark, his eyes locked on me, his good hand shoving millionaires out of his way. He grabbed me from behind, his good arm locking around my throat, cutting off my air. "You!" he screamed, his voice a raw shriek in my ear. He pressed something cold and hard to my temple, a small, silver pistol. "You did this, you and him. You took my money." The crowd screamed again, parting around us. "Let her go, Pike," Ernesto's voice said. He was 20 feet away, standing perfectly still, his hands open at his sides. He was a statue of lethal calm. "You stay back," Pike shrieked, dragging me backward toward the stairs to the lower deck. "I'm getting off this boat, and she is my ticket. We are going to the engine room. Now move, bitch." He jammed the pistol harder into my scalp. I could not breathe. I was going to die. "Juniper," Ernesto said, his voice quiet, but it cut through my panic. He was not looking at Pike. He was looking at me. "Listen to me. Do you remember the rooftop?" I could barely nod, my vision starting to dim. "Trust the blind spot on the left," he whispered. "The blind spot on the left." I knew what he meant. The railing, the drill. Pike was dragging me along the portside railing, using the narrow walkway to keep Ernesto at bay. Use my own joint against me. Step inside the strike. Find the angle. Pike was focused on Ernesto. His body twisted. He was strong, but his left arm, his good arm, was extended across my body, holding the gun. He was exposed. "Now!" I screamed, more a gasp than a word. I did not try to break his grip. I did what Ernesto taught me. I collapsed. I used the bottom railing as my pivot point. I dropped my entire body weight down and to the left, ducking under his arm, into the blind spot created by the stairwell housing. For 1/2 second, Pike was left standing there, his arm extended, holding a gun to empty air. He had lost his hostage. He was off balance. He was not off balance for long. Ernesto moved. He was not a man. He was a blur. He closed the 20 feet in 2 steps. He did not go for the gun. He went for the man. He struck Pike's injured shoulder with the heel of his palm. Pike screamed, a sound of pure agony, his body convulsing as the broken bones ground together. The gun flew from his numb fingers, clattering across the deck. Ernesto did not stop. He followed through. stepping inside Pike's guard, turning with the motion and driving a single, precise elbow into Pike's solar plexus. Pike crumpled, folding like a cheap suit, all the air and fight knocked out of him. He lay on the expensive teak deck, wheezing, his one good hand clutching his ruined shoulder. It was over in 3 seconds. It was brutal, efficient, and perfectly controlled. The deck was silent, save for Pike's ragged breathing and the distant sound of sirens. "Secure him," Ernesto said to the ship's captain. Then the port police, a generic, no-nonsense local unit, swarmed up the gangplank. They were not here by accident. Yara was with them, her face grim, holding a tablet. "That is Rowan Pike," she said, pointing. "We have digital and recorded evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud and extortion. And this," she just zero-read to the stunned crowd, "is the Green Shoal Foundation. The entire scene is to be sealed." As the officers began escorting the panicked, wealthy guests ashore, one by one, I looked for Daria. She was gone. Then I saw her, down on the water, near the stern, a small, black motor launch, the kind used for ship-to-shore transfers, was peeling away from the yacht's shadow, its engine a low, desperate thrum. Daria was at the helm, her silver dress catching the harbor lights. Beside her on the seat was a heavy, waterproof suitcase. She looked back at me. One last time, across the dark water, her face was not angry. It was not scared. It was free. She had her escape, and she was taking one last piece of the company with her. The day after the yacht, after the adrenaline and the panic, a strange, heavy quiet settled over the city. Rowan Pike was in custody, his assets frozen, but Daria was gone. And Daria, I was learning, was far more dangerous than Pike. Pike was a blunt instrument. Daria was a scalpel. Mabel was having a Sunday. That is what we called them. A day where the fog of her medication and her fatigue lifted, and she was the woman who raised me sharp, clear, and full of stories. She was sitting up in her bed in the Uptown Hotel, a place she tolerated with polite suspicion, and she was watching the traffic move below. "Your grandfather, Arthur, he would have hated this," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "All these metal boxes. He liked the open water." I sat on the edge of her bed, just happy to listen. Neela, the silent, watchful aide, stood by the door, pretending to read a magazine. "He was a keeper, you know," Mabel said, her eyes distant, "at Point Celestine. Before the automated lights went in, he said the light was a voice, and it was his job to make sure it never grew hoarse. He loved the storm. June. He said it was the only time the world was truly honest." She reached for her worn purse on the nightstand. She fumbled inside, past her pill bottles and tissues, and her fingers closed on something. "He gave me this. After our first winter there," she said. She pressed something cold, heavy, and iron into my palm. It was a key, an old, ornate, deeply rusted skeleton key. He said this was to open something only the brave could open. I think he meant his heart, but maybe not. I closed my hand around it. It felt like a piece of history. "It is beautiful, Mabel." "You keep it," she said, her eyes suddenly sharp, clear, and focused on me. "You are brave, Juniper, braver than you know. Do not let anyone put out your light." That night, I could not sleep. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of Ernesto's penthouse. We were back in his fortress of glass and steel. The city glittered below, a cold, beautiful galaxy that felt 1,000,000 miles away. His power was absolute. The police, the courts, the entire city grid seemed to move at his command, and I was standing in the center of it. "I am afraid of this," I said, my voice quiet. I did not turn. I could feel him standing behind me. "Daria is gone. Pike is caged. You are safe," he said. "No." I turned to face him. "I'm afraid of this." I gestured to the sprawling view, the sheer, breathtaking altitude. "I'm afraid of being dissolved. I'm a courier. Ernesto, I am a cleaner. My world is the pavement, the smell of bleach. I am not. I do not want to disappear into your life, to become just a part of your story." He looked at me for a long time, his face unreadable in the dim light. "When I was in the lighthouse with you," he said, his voice low. "I looked at your hands, the calluses from your bike, the raw skin from the chemicals. I am not interested in someone who disappears. Juniper, I am not interested in glass." He stepped closer, close enough for me to feel the heat radiating from his body. "I do not want an echo. I want a counterpart. I want you to stand opposite me, not 2 steps behind me." I held his gaze. "Then I have conditions." A flicker of surprise in his eyes. He nodded. "Name them." 1. I keep my job at the aquarium. It is mine. It is real. No arguments. "Agreed," he said, without hesitation. 2. Sunday mornings, from 9 a.m. until noon. They are for Mabel. No business, no phones, no guards in the room. Just me and her. "Agreed." 3. I took a breath. "I have veto power on where I live. This place," I motioned to the penthouse, "is not a home. It is a perch. It is for watching. I cannot live in a place where I cannot touch the ground." He was quiet for a moment. He looked out the window. "At the Empire," he commanded. "Agreed," he said. A strange, new equilibrium settled between us. He had accepted my boundaries. He reciprocated. "My father's business was gray," he said, turning back to me. "He moved in the shadows, in the spaces between the laws. It is a heavy legacy. It is a world of necessary violence and constant defense." He walked to his desk, picked up a heavy, bound prospectus. The cover read, "Bartolucci Maritime and Security. I am moving into the light," he said. "I want to build a fleet of high-speed salvage ships, green logistics, deep-sea rescue, from here to the Alaskan shelf. I want to pull things from the storm, not just manage the tide." He was showing me the man who saved the fishermen, the man who fixed the wobbly table. He was showing me his dream. I looked at the prospectus, at the ambitious plans. "You will need a charter," I said, finding my voice. "A set of rules, for operations, for ethics." A slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine, unguarded smile I had ever seen from him. "I will." "I can help you write it," I said. The moment was perfect. It was a promise of a future, a partnership. And then his phone, the one Kaido had secured, buzzed on the desk. He looked at the screen. His new smile vanished, his face going flat. "It is for you." He handed me the phone, a message from an anonymous, encrypted number. It was a video file. I pressed play. My blood turned to ice. It was Mabel. She was sitting on a public city bus. I saw the route number in the window, the number 12, the line that runs from the university, past the hospital, and down to the docks. She was frail, her head resting against the glass, unaware she was being filmed. The camera was 2 seats behind her. The video zoomed in, held for 5 seconds, then cut to black. The timestamp read 1 hour ago. She took her," I stammered, my hands flying to my mouth. "She got her out, "No," Ernesto said, his voice a low, lethal vibration. He took the phone from my trembling hand. "She put her back. Neela confirmed Mabel was gone for exactly 30 minutes and then returned. She bypassed security. She bypassed my aide. This was not a kidnapping. Juniper, this was a demonstration of reach." Daria. It was Daria. She was showing me that all of Ernesto's power, his guards, his safe houses, meant nothing. She could touch Mabel whenever she wanted. I was frantic. She could have hurt her. She could have... "She will not," Ernesto said, his voice now pure, cold steel. He was already on the phone, speaking in a low, rapid code. "Daria is not Pike. She does not want revenge. She wants the data, the original data. She is negotiating, and she just named her price." I watched, horrified, as my war, my choices. Put my grandmother in a cage, within the hour. A private ambulance, staffed by 2 men who looked like Maddox, arrived at the hotel. Mabel was being moved. "Where?" I cried, as I watched them wheel her out, protesting sleepily. "Serene Bay Convalescent Center." Ernesto said, his hand resting on my back. "It is the most secure private medical facility on the coast. It is airtight. No one gets in. No one gets out, not even me, without a 3-day clearance. She is safe there. June, I promise you." I felt ill as I watched the ambulance pull away. "This is my fault," I whispered. The guilt of physical weight. I started this. I dragged her into my war. Ernesto watched me, his face grim. He saw the iron key clutched in my hand, the one from Mabel. He gently took it from me, looked at it, and then reached into his own pocket, pulling out his own keys. He studied the one from Mabel. "I know this key," he said, his voice quiet. "Point Celestine, your grandfather's lighthouse. My family has owned that land for 50 years. He held my hand, pressed the old, rusted key back into my palm. "It is abandoned, but it is solid. It is stone, and it is yours. When this is too loud, when I am too loud, you go there. It is a place for silence." We drove back to the Beacon House that night, our lighthouse. The air was different. The intimacy we had found here was strained, stretched thin by Daria's threat. He was waiting for me on the stone balcony that wrapped around the lantern room. The air was absolutely still. The sea below us was a sheet of flat, gray metal. There was no wind. He was holding a small wooden box. Inside, nestled on velvet, were 6 small, delicate glass bells. Without a word, he took one out and tied it to the iron railing with a piece of leather cord. "Honesty," he said. I took the next one. The glass was cool against my skin. I tied it beside his respect. He hung a third. "No unnecessary violence." He met my eyes, his gaze heavy. "I cannot promise there will be none. Juniper, this world is not built that way, but I can promise it will never be without purpose, and it will never touch you." I hung the last bell, my hands shaking slightly. "We finish this together." We stood there, side by side, looking out at the unnatural, breathless calm. The glass bells hung silent, not making a sound. The sky was a low, heavy, yellowish-gray lid. "I hate this," I whispered. "It is too quiet." Ernesto put his arm around my waist, pulling me against his side. "It is the calm," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The air is holding its breath." It was the most terrifying sound in the world, the absolute heavy silence before the final storm. That heavy, unnatural quiet lasted for 1 day. We spent it at Point Celestine, the abandoned lighthouse. I had Mabel's iron key in my pocket, and Ernesto had his. We went down into the musty, stone-walled basement, a place that smelled of salt, cold earth, and 100 years of storms. There, under a pile of rotted canvas tarps, was a small, teak sea chest. Mabel's key slid into the rusted lock. It turned with a groan. It was not full of treasure. It was full of books, old leather-bound ship's logs, my grandfather's, but tucked inside the last log, dated 1972, was something that did not belong, a modern, laminated map of the Rainport Harbor. It was covered in strange, handwritten notations, not bearings or depths, but codes, 3 short, 1 long, red, green, red, 2-second pulse. "It is not a map," Ernesto said, his voice low, his fingers tracing the lines. "It is a conversation." We took it back to Kaido. He worked for hours, cross-referencing the light codes with old harbor patrol manuals. "It is a language," he said finally, his eyes wide. "A smuggling code. Your grandfather did not just watch the sea, June. He was watching the smugglers, and he was recording their language." Then he turned to Ernesto, his face grim. "They are still using it. A modified version. Daria's video of your grandmother was not a threat. Ernesto, it was a signal. She was using the number 12 bus line code. She was telling you where the exchange is." Kaido pointed to the screen. "Daria is not just moving data. She is moving their entire treasury, a cold storage wallet, everything. And she is doing it tonight." The location was insane. The Mariner Glass Bridge, a massive $1.5 billion vanity project, an elevated pedestrian walkway that arced over the deepest part of the bay. It was beautiful, impossible, and, most importantly, unfinished. It was a construction site, closed to the public, a dead zone 1,000 feet above the water. "Daria is meeting Pike there," I asked, my blood running cold. "It is the perfect neutral ground," Ernesto said, his mind already working, piecing it together. "It is the only escape route. They will meet in the middle, make the exchange, and walk away in opposite directions. She gives him the wallet. He gives her a new life." "So we stop them," I said, my hand closing into a fist. "We take the wallet." "No," Ernesto said. He was looking at the bridge schematics Kaito had pulled up. "Pike is a cornered rat. He will be armed. He will be violent. He will destroy the data before he lets us take it. And Daria is desperate. We do not do a heist." He looked at me, a cold, sharp intelligence in his eyes. "We do a reverse heist. We do not steal the wallet. We make them give it to us. We cut off their escape. We make the bridge a dead end that points directly to a legal trap." The plan was simple, and it was terrifying. I was the linchpin. At 10 p.m., I was 100 feet above the black water, walking the glass deck of the Mariner Bridge. A hard hat was pulled low over my face, and I wore a heavy canvas tool belt and a high-visibility vest. I was June Harris, Materials Integrity Engineer, here to do a late-night stress test on the new load-bearing acrylic panels. I knew the language. My nights at the aquarium, I had read every manual on the tanks. I knew the molecular structure of polymerized methyl methacrylate. I knew its load tolerances, its shear points, its acoustic signature under stress. I had spent 2 hours with Ernesto's team, learning the specific engineering jargon for the bridge. I sounded the part. My job was simple. Daria would be coming from the west, Pike from the east. I was part of the skeleton crew of construction workers, all of whom were Ernesto's men, disguised. My only goal, get close enough to Daria's waterproof suitcase to attach a small, magnetic beacon. Then the wind hit. It was not a breeze. It was a sudden, violent gust that came from the north, a cold, angry river of air. The bridge, a structure of glass and steel cables, began to sing. It was a low, vibrational hum that came up through the soles of my boots. The massive glass panels around me, each one 3 inches thick, vibrated with the sound, a terrifying, deep-throated chord. Far below the surface of the bay was a sheet of churning, ink-black water. I saw her, Daria. She was walking toward the center spar, alone, carrying a heavy, black waterproof case. She wore tactical pants and a dark jacket, her platinum hair a beacon in the dim construction lights. She was no longer Daria. She was a ghost. I moved toward her, my own tool case in hand, pretending to check a junction box. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area. You need to come with me." She looked at me, her eyes dead, and then she recognized me. Her face did not register shock. It registered annoyance. "You," she breathed, "you just cannot let it go. Can you, June?" "It is over, Daria. Give me the case." "It is not over," she said. "It is just beginning. My new life." I took a step closer. My hand went to my belt, to the beacon. "Pike is just using you. He will kill you as soon as he has that drive." "He will not get the chance," she said. She was fast. She swung the heavy case, not at my head, but at my tool belt. The magnetic beacon, which I was holding in my palm, flew from my grasp, skittering across the glass deck and coming to rest near her feet. She looked down at the small, black disc. She looked up at me, her face, for the first time, filled with a deep, personal rage. "A tracker!" she screamed, her voice ripped away by the howling wind. "You were never my friend. You were just a weight." She lunged. She was not trying to hit me. She grabbed the front of my vest and my safety harness and ran me backward. My boots slipped on the vibrating glass. She slammed my back against the low, temporary railing at the edge of the unfinished bridge. "You want it so bad," she shrieked, pressing me over the void, Go get it! I looked down. There was nothing below me but a 1,000-foot drop to the black water. The wind was trying to peel me from the bridge. And then I heard it, a high-pitched tearing sound. Crack! We both froze. We both looked down. The glass panel we were standing on, the one right at the edge, had a new spiderweb-thin fracture running through it. It was a hairline crack, but on a bridge like this, it was a death sentence. The wind hummed, the glass sang its note of stress. "Daria," I said, my voice barely a whisper, just for her, under the shriek of the wind. "He will betray you. I will not. You can start over. Right now, just come back from the edge." I saw it, a flicker, a second of indecision. The Daria I knew, the one who ate cereal from the box, was still in there, trapped behind the ice. Her face trembled, a single frozen second of doubt. Then the ice reformed. Her face hardened. "I'm starting over," she hissed. She did not push me. She grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked my head back, pressing me harder against the failing railing. "Daria," a voice boomed, sharp and cold. "Ernesto." He was not on the bridge. He was above it. He was descending from the dark skeleton of the main construction crane, clipped to a heavy-duty safety line. He landed on the glass 2 yards away, a spider descending on a thread. He was holding 2 clips. In one smooth, practiced motion, he grabbed the D-ring on the back of my safety harness and clipped me to his own line. With his other hand, he grabbed the front of Daria's jacket, yanking her away from me, away from the fractured glass, and throwing her to the solid center of the walkway. "Stay down," he commanded. Headlights, shouts from both ends of the bridge. Rowan Pike was here, and he had brought his men, at least 6 of them, emerging from the eastern shadows. "Hey, Bartolucci!" Pike screamed, his good arm leveling a pistol. "You just could not stay away. You want the wallet, come and get it." Pike's men fanned out, creating a line. Ernesto did not draw a weapon. He pulled me behind him, his body a solid wall, and unclipped something from his belt. It was not a gun. It was his phone. He held it up, the screen facing the confrontation. "What are you doing?" I whispered, my heart hammering. "Yara is on the line. Juniper," he said, his voice low and calm, a rock in the middle of the howling wind. "She is watching. The district attorney is watching with her. Liv." Pike stopped. He saw the phone. He saw the calm on Ernesto's face. "This is not an ambush," Ernesto said, his voice carrying over the wind. "It is a deposition. You are surrounded. Pike, the bridge is locked down. Every man you see." He gestured to the construction workers who were now calmly forming a perimeter. "Is a witness. Every word you say is evidence." The reverse heist. He had not come to take the wallet. He had come to receive it, publicly, on camera. Pike looked at Daria. He looked at the suitcase. He looked at Ernesto. He saw the trap. He had one escape route. "Kill them!" he shrieked at his men. But before his men could move, a sound cut through the wind, louder than the wind, a deep, earth-shaking blar, a ship's horn. Then another, and another. I looked over the edge. The black water below was no longer black. It was lit up by dozens of high-intensity searchlights, a fleet of tugboats, harbor patrol boats, and Bartolucci maritime vessels. They were forming a solid, impassable ring of light around the base of the bridge. At the same time, brilliant blue and red lights exploded at both ends of the bridge. Heavy-duty trucks marked Mariner Bridge Construction Security blockaded the exits. The sound of sirens joined the ship horns, a deafening chorus. They were trapped, above, below, and on both sides. Pike looked at the lights. He looked at Ernesto's phone, still streaming, still recording. He looked at the suitcase Daria was holding. He made his choice. He grabbed the suitcase from Daria's hand and, screaming in pure, animal rage, he ran. He did not run toward the police. He ran toward the edge. He jumped over the railing and landed on one of the massive, dark support beams that ran under the bridge, a skeleton of steel in the darkness. He was a rat, fleeing into the guts of the ship. He was a silhouette against the flashing blue and red lights, a frantic spider scrambling on the massive steel I-beam beneath the glass deck. The wind up here was a physical thing, a solid wall of noise that tried to peel us from the bridge. Pike was desperate, his good arm clutching the heavy waterproof case, his broken one flapping uselessly. He fumbled with a device on his belt and clicked it. He deployed a jammer. Kaito's voice crackled in Ernesto's earpiece, sharp with static. I am losing thermal. All drone feeds are compromised. He's in the superstructure. He's dark. Pike was a ghost in the guts of the bridge, moving with a desperate animal agility, leaping from girder to crossbeam, a shadow against the dark, churning water 1,000 feet below. Ernesto did not chase him. He did not run to the edge and look over. He stood solid, a rock in the middle of the chaos, and turned to me. His face was calm. Your grandfather's map. Juniper, he said, his voice low and sharp over the howl of the wind. The light codes. Kaito is blind. You are the keeper's granddaughter. You have to talk to the boats. I looked down at the dark water, at the fleet of Bartolucci vessels and harbor patrols, their searchlights cutting uselessly through the dark. They were waiting. The code, he pressed. The old language. What is the signal for converge and surge? I closed my eyes, picturing the worn, laminated map, the scribbled notes in the margin, 3 short, 1 long. That is it, I said, my voice finding its strength. 3 short flashes, 1 long flash. It is the old distress call. Immediate assistance required at beacon. Ernesto grabbed a high-powered tactical flashlight from Maddox. He aimed it down into the dark expanse, at the lead tugboat, the Celestine. He looked at me. Tell them. I nodded. 3 short, I commanded. He clicked the light 3 times. Sharp, fast, powerful. Flash, flash, flash. 1 long, I said. He held the beam steady for a full 2 seconds. We waited. A beat of silence. Then, from the blackness below, the Celestine's massive forward searchlight answered, Flash, 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 loong. They heard me. Now what? Ernesto asked, his eyes still scanning the darkness below. It is a reverse wave, I said, the pieces clicking into place, my grandfather's world and mine colliding. It is a containment protocol. The boats will use their thrusters to create a surge against the pylons, to stop a landing, or to shake something loose. A grim smile touched Ernesto's lips. He raised the light again and flashed a new sequence, the one I had pointed out on the map, the one for full power. The boats below us turned, all 6 of them, tugs and patrol vessels, turned their bows inward toward the massive concrete pylon that Pike was scrambling toward. Then, as one, they hit their engines at full throttle. The water, already rough, became a focused weapon. A massive, churning, unnatural wave built up and slammed into the base of the pylon. The entire Mariner Bridge shuddered. The steel beam beneath our feet groaned, a deep, tectonic sound of protest. Pike screamed. The I-beam he was on bucked like a wild horse. He was thrown off balance, his bad arm swinging, his feet slipping on the wet steel. The waterproof case flew from his good hand. It did not fall. It skidded, hit a rivet and landed on a crossbeam, teetering 5 feet away from him. He lunged for it, but someone else was closer. Daria. She'd been crawling, following him, her last hope slipping away. She was on the same beam, just yards behind. She looked at Pike, clawing his way toward the case. She looked up at me, 100 feet above, a silhouette against the flashing lights. She saw her chance, not to escape, to end it. As Pike's fingers brushed the handle, Daria lunged. She kicked the case, hard. It slid across the wet steel, away from Pike, and came to rest directly at the base of the access ladder, right below where I stood. Pike let out a howl of pure fury and turned on her, but Daria just sat back on the beam, her platinum hair plastered to her face, the fight completely gone. She looked up at me, her voice ripped away by the wind, but I read her lips. I'm tired. Yara, now, Ernesto said into his mic. Yara was already there, flanked by 2 men from the district attorney's office, their mobile cameras filming every move. She did not go near the edge. She used a long, telescoping evidence pole, hooked the handle of the case, and reeled it in, placing it on the dry, clean deck. "Yara Vitale, counsel for the plaintiffs," she stated, her voice crisp and clear for the cameras. Receiving one waterproof case, presumably containing the complete digital treasury of the Black Turn Collective. She popped the latches. Inside, nestled in foam, was a single, silver, cold storage hard drive. "We have the asset." Pike saw it. He saw his money, his power, his entire world, being tagged and bagged. He let out a sound that was not human. It was all rage, all loss. He scrambled up the ladder, his face a mask of contorted fury. He was not going for the case. He was not trying to escape. He was coming for me. "You!" he shrieked, launching himself over the railing, his one good arm outstretched like a claw. "You took it all from me!" Ernesto moved, a solid wall stepping in front of me, bracing to take the impact. But I was already in motion. Step inside, find the weak point, use the leverage. Pike was leading with his good arm, his only weapon, as his hand reached for my throat. I did not step back. I stepped in, under his reach. I caught his wrist, just as I had been taught. I did not try to stop his momentum. I used it. I pivoted on my hip, using the solid steel railing of the bridge as my lever. I ducked, pulling his arm over my shoulder and driving his wrist down onto the bar. It was a perfect, clean, controlled lock. There was no pop. Just pure, agonizing pressure on his elbow and wrist. He screamed, his knees buckling, his body trapped, his arm pinned at an impossible angle. I had not broken him. I had neutralized him. The bridge security force swarmed him, cuffing his hands and ankles. He was done. Yara was already giving her statement to the DA, who had just arrived. "We have the suspect. We have the ledger, and we have about 50 witnesses," she said, a sharp, satisfied smile on her face. "I think it is time for a press conference." Right there, on the windswept bridge, under the flashing lights of the entire city, they unmasked the Urban Integrity Council. They showed the world the face of the corruption. I watched them lead Daria away. She was in cuffs, but she was not fighting. She looked small and young and impossibly tired. She stopped when she passed me. Is Mabel okay?" she whispered, her eyes fixed on the deck. "She is safe," I said. "Good." Daria nodded and finally looked up, her eyes clear for the first time since I had known her. "I'm sorry. June. For the rent. For everything. I just wanted to be someone else." "Me too," I said. She signed a full confession. She became the state's star witness, her testimony burying what was left of the Black Turns and half the city council. The money from the hard drive, all $1.2 million, was seized and put into a restitution fund, Mrs. Petrov got her money back. Sal got his money back. The war was over. Far away, in her quiet room at Serene Bay, Mabel was sitting up in bed, watching the live news feed from the bridge. She watched me lock Pike's arm. She watched me stand beside Ernesto as the police took control. A nurse came in to check her vitals. Mabel pointed at the screen, a small, proud smile on her face. She put her hand over her own heart. "You see that?" she said to the nurse. "That is my granddaughter. She protected herself." Dawn. The storm was gone. The air was scrubbed clean, and the sky was a pale, clear, impossible gold. Ernesto and I were standing on the Mariner Bridge. It was empty now, the sirens and crowds replaced by the cry of seagulls and the smell of salt. We stood at the edge, right where the glass panel had cracked. A construction crew was already there, replacing it with a new, stronger one. He was silent for a long time, watching the sun climb over the ocean. "My father's world was dark," he said, his voice quiet. "It was a world of shadows, of necessary evils. I lived in it because it was my legacy, because it was all I knew." He turned to me, the new golden light catching the warmth in his eyes. He took my hand, the one with the calluses. "I do not want to be a shadow anymore, Juniper," he said. "I am leaving the dark. Not for redemption, not to be forgiven, but because I want to walk next to you, in the sun. I looked up at him, at this man who was both a storm and a harbor, and I smiled. I stepped forward, into his space, and rested my forehead against his, just as we had in the lighthouse. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. We stood as one, a new, solid structure, outlined against the rising sun. And far away, on the point, as the first real morning breeze came in off the water, the small glass bells on the lighthouse balcony finally began to ring. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories. Give this video a like and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people. We appreciate your support.